In this section, we will spend most of the time studying the presidents of the late 20th century and into the 21st century. After active duty in the Naval Reserve during World War II, Nixon was elected to the House of Representatives in 1946. His work on the Alger Hiss case established his reputation as a leading anti-communist, which elevated him to national prominence, and in 1950 he was elected to the Senate. Interestingly, he and John F. Kennedy were both elected to the House of Representatives in 1946, and both would move into the Senate at the same time in 1950. Similar to Kennedy's selection of Lyndon Johnson as his running mate in 1960, Eisenhower selected Nixon to be his running mate because he wanted to placate the conservative wing of the Republican Party. Nixon was doggedly anti-communist, to bring youth to the ticket, and to attract Western voters. Mr. Nixon lost the 1960 presidential election to John F. Kennedy by 112,000 votes. There were claims of voter fraud in Illinois and Texas at the time, but nothing has ever been proven. On November 5, 1968, Americans selected Richard M. Nixon as the 37th President of the United States. Nixon won the election by nearly 500,000 votes. Most likely, Nixon won the election by criticizing Hubert Humphrey's role in the Vietnam War, connecting him to the unpopular President Lyndon Johnson and the general disorder in the nation. President Nixon's trip to China in 1972 ended 25 years of isolation between the United States and the People's Republic of China, PRC, and resulted in establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries in 1979. In May 1972, Nixon visited the Soviet Union in an attempt to thaw relations with that country as well. While in the Soviet Union, Mr. Nixon met with General Secretary Leonid Brezhnev. This visit featured the signing of the Anti-Ballistic Missile (ABM) Treaty, the first Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, and the U.S.-Soviet Incidents at Sea Agreement. The 1972 presidential campaign was between Richard Nixon and George McGovern, senator from South Dakota. Two things stand out during this campaign. One, Senator McGovern had long been seen by the public as someone who was open, candid, and credible. After winning the Democratic nomination, he chose Thomas F. Eagleton as his running mate, after having been turned down by numerous other Democrats. Within 2 weeks of his selection as the vice presidential running mate, news broke that Eagleton had been hospitalized 3 times in 12 years for nervous exhaustion, had received psychiatric care, and had twice been given electroshock treatments. While McGovern initially said he would have asked Eagleton to be on the ticket with him regardless of his medical history, he began dropping hints that Eagleton would be dropped from the ticket. Despite Eagleton's efforts to stay on the ticket, McGovern eventually persuaded him to withdraw. 2. The Watergate break-in. In 1973, Nixon announced the end of the Vietnam War. In reality, he meant the withdrawal of U.S. combat troops, which effectively ended America's direct military involvement in the war. The term Watergate has come to represent an array of illegal and secret activities undertaken by the Nixon administration during the 1972 presidential campaign. These activities became public knowledge in the aftermath of 5 men breaking into the Democratic Party headquarters located at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. on June 17, 1972. While Mr. Nixon and various White House administrators tried to distance themselves from the fallout related to the break-in, the Watergate break-in would eventually be connected to the White House. While uncovering the White House's connection to the break-in, journalists would eventually uncover a host of other illegal activities associated with the Nixon White House. Amid great concerns that he might be impeached and then indicted for his actions during his presidency, Mr. Nixon submitted his one-sentence letter of resignation to Secretary of State Henry Kissinger on August 9, 1974. While in flight to California from Washington, Nixon's vice president, Gerald R. Ford, was sworn in as the 38th President of the United States. 1 month later, on September 8, 1974, President Ford granted Mr. Nixon a full, free, and absolute pardon for all offenses against the United States which he, Richard Nixon, committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 20, 1969 through August 9, 1974. President Ford served during World War II and was selected to be Nixon's vice president after Vice President Spiro Agnew resigned. Section 2 of the 25th Amendment gave the president the power to name a new vice president if that office became vacant, with the permission of Congress. With Mr. Nixon's resignation, Mr. Ford ascended the presidency, making him the only person to assume the vice presidency and the presidency without having been elected to either office. While Nixon was credited with ending American military involvement in the Vietnam War, Ford is credited with ending the war. During a speech given at Tulane University in April 1975, Ford said the Vietnam War was finished as far as America was concerned. The United States would no longer provide monies to help the South Vietnamese fight. While President Ford ordered the evacuation of U.S. personnel from the South Vietnamese capital, Saigon, he also allowed U.S. forces to aid others who wished to escape from the communist advance. 40,000 U.S. citizens and South Vietnamese were evacuated by plane until enemy attacks made further evacuations impossible. President Ford ran for a second term in 1976, but was defeated by Jimmy Carter. Many believe that Ford's full pardon of Richard Nixon led to his inability to be reelected. James Earl Jimmy Carter took the oath of office of President of the United States on January 20, 1977. During his campaign, he was not well known outside his home state of Georgia. His one-term presidency would be marred by inflation, an energy crisis, war in Afghanistan, and the Iranian hostage crisis. Of all the events that marred his presidency, it was perhaps his administration's handling of the Iranian hostage crisis that was most prominent in his defeat for a second term. After losing his bid for re-election, Mr. Carter retired from public service and became an elder statesman of the country. He and Mrs. Carter volunteered for Habitat for Humanity, as well as numerous other volunteer organizations. In 2002, Mr. Carter became only one of 4 U.S. presidents who had won a Nobel Peace Prize. Mr. Carter's prize was awarded for his decades of untiring effort to find peaceful solutions to international conflicts, to advance democracy and human rights, and to promote economic and social development. On November 4, 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States in a landslide victory, 489 to 49 electoral college votes. Mr. Reagan served as the first true conservative president in over 50 years. During his inaugural address, the 53 American hostages who had been held hostage for 444 days in Iran were released by the Iranian government. John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate President Reagan as he was leaving the Washington Hilton Hotel. 4 men, including Mr. Reagan, were injured during the attempt. All of them survived, although Press Secretary James Brady had the most serious wounds. The bullet that struck Brady hit him in the head above his left eye, passing underneath his brain and shattering his brain cavity, exploding on impact. His wound left him with slurred speech and partial paralysis that full-time use of a wheelchair for the remainder of his life was required. Brady died in August 2014. The medical examiner ruled his death as a homicide caused by the gunshot wound that he sustained in 1981. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity. He was confined to St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. until his conditional release in 2016. He was unconditionally released in 2022. When Reagan took office, the economy was one of double-digit inflation and interest rates near 20%. Reagan's economic policies highlighted his long-standing dislike of high federal income taxes. Reagan embraced the theory of supply-side economics, feeling that tax cuts encouraged economic expansion, which would result in increased federal government revenue at a lower tax rate. Throughout his presidency, Ronald Reagan constantly referred to the Soviet Union as the evil empire. In June 1987, during a speech at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, Germany, Mr. Reagan challenged General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down this wall, in reference to the Berlin Wall, which had been built in 1961 to physically separate East Berlin from West Berlin, and in essence, separate East Germany from West Germany. During his presidency, Ronald Reagan pursued policies that reflected his personal belief in individual freedom, brought changes domestically, both to the U.S. economy and expanded the military, and contributed to the end of the Cold War. Reagan died at his home on June 5, 2004. He died of pneumonia, complicated by Alzheimer's. George H. W. Bush was Reagan's vice president for 8 years and was selected as the standard bearer for the Republican Party at its presidential convention in August 1988. He was elected President of the United States on November 8, 1989 by a landslide vote. He defeated Democratic nominee Michael Dukakis, governor of Massachusetts. At the start of his presidency, Mr. Bush presided over many historical events, including the collapse of the Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the end of the Cold War. These events, along with others, would lead him to achieve an 89% approval rating in March 1991. The Persian Gulf War was triggered by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait on August 2, 1990. Iraq's leader, Saddam Hussein, ordered the invasion and occupation of Kuwait with the apparent aim of acquiring that nation's large oil reserves, canceling a large debt Iraq owed Kuwait, and expanding Iraqi power in the region. Operation Desert Storm would begin in January 1991. While the economic recession of the late 1980s and early 1990s officially ended in March 1991, the perceptions among Americans that the economy was in poor shape persisted well into the 1992 election year, causing a sharp decline in Mr. Bush's approval ratings and leading to his loss of the presidency to William Jefferson Clinton. Despite their animosity towards each other during the 1992 election, Mr. Bush and Mr. Clinton became friends after their terms in office ended. They appeared in television ads in 2005 urging people to donate funds for aid to Hurricane Katrina victims. Bill Clinton was born William Jefferson Blythe. His father was killed in a car accident 3 months before Bill was born. His mother remarried, and at the age of 15, Mr. Clinton would adopt his stepfather's last name as his own. Don't ask, don't tell was the official United States policy on military service of non-heterosexual people, instituted during the Clinton administration. The policy was issued under the Department of Defense Directive 1304.26 on December 21, 1993, and was in effect from February 28, 1994 until September 20, 2011. The policy prohibited military personnel from discriminating against or harassing closeted homosexual or bisexual service members or applicants, while barring openly gay, lesbian, or bisexual persons from military service. Mr. Clinton's Deficit Reduction Act of 1993 stemmed from a budget proposal made by Clinton in February 1993. He sought a mix of tax increases and spending reductions that would cut the deficit in half by 1997. Though every congressional Republican voted against the bill, it passed by narrow margins in the House of Representatives and the Senate. The act increased the top federal income tax rate from 31% to 39.6%, increased the corporate income tax, raised fuel taxes, and raised various other taxes. The bill also included $255 billion in spending cuts over a 5-year period. In 1998, the effects of the bill helped the U.S. federal government to experience its first budget surplus since the 1960s. Mr. Clinton served 2 terms and was the first president since the end of World War II to not have served during that war. George W. Bush, eldest son of George H. W. Bush, was inaugurated as President of the United States on January 20, 2001. He defeated Vice President Al Gore in an election in which deciding the winner was in flux for at least a month. Mr. Bush lost the popular vote by 543,895 votes, but won the electoral vote count by 4 votes. 8 months into his presidency, the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks occurred. In response, Bush announced a global war on terrorism, ordered an invasion of Afghanistan that same year, and an invasion of Iraq in 2003. In 2005, the Bush administration dealt with widespread criticism over its handling of Hurricane Katrina. The United States entered its longest post-World War II recession in December 2007. This prompted the Bush administration to take more direct control of the economy, enacting multiple economic programs intended to preserve the country's financial system. Since the end of his presidency, Mr. Bush has been heavily involved in the creation of his presidential library in Dallas, as well as the Bush Institute. The Institute was created for the purpose of continuing discussions about the best policies to foster economic growth, human freedom, education, global health, and various women's initiatives. He has also been involved in other charity work. Barack Obama made presidential history when he became the first African American to be elected president. During his first few days in office, Mr. Obama issued executive orders and presidential memoranda directing the U.S. military to develop plans to withdraw troops from Iraq and ordered the closing of the Guantanamo Bay detention camp by January 2010. He also reduced the secrecy given to presidential records and changed procedures to promote disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. In February 2009, Obama signed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 into law. The act was a $787 billion economic stimulus package aimed at helping the economy recover from the deepening worldwide recession. In 2009, Mr. Obama became the 4th U.S. president to win the Nobel Peace Prize for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. On May 2, 2011, he addressed the nation with the announcement that Osama bin Laden had been killed during an operation led by the United States. In his remarks, he stated that justice had been done. The attack ended a manhunt of almost 10 years. Donald J. Trump, Republican, was elected President of the United States on November 8, 2016. He defeated Hillary Clinton, who had been Secretary of State during the Obama administration. Mr. Trump's political goals while president included both foreign goals as well as domestic goals. On the campaign trail and in his inaugural address, Mr. Trump declared his commitment to what he called an America First approach to foreign policy. More generally, Trump's foreign policy reflected an isolationist stand that had largely been marginalized in national affairs since World War II. Mr. Trump's domestic priorities largely reflected the themes he campaigned on: restricting immigration, strengthening public infrastructure, reducing taxes, and repealing the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. His success in implementing that agenda was mixed. Mr. Trump faced impeachment twice during his one term. The first impeachment trial stemmed from a call President Trump had with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in which the president asked Mr. Zelensky to announce two investigations, one involving his potential opponent in the upcoming 2020 presidential election, and a second into unsubstantiated allegations that entities within Ukraine had interfered in the 2016 presidential election. The second impeachment trial occurred in the waning days of the Trump presidency following the events of January 6, 2021. Mr. Trump was acquitted on all charges. Mr. Biden, who had been vice president under Barack Obama, defeated Donald Trump for the presidency in 2020. Prior to his election as vice president, Mr. Biden had served as a U.S. Senator from Delaware for 36 years. Mr. Biden has faced challenges during his presidency, both foreign and domestic.